All right. Okay, we are in John. Let's see, Brother Jonathan, did you say y'all said something about the nobleman's son or not?
I did not get to the nobleman's.
Okay. All right. Well, we make a brief comment on that. It's let's see, I have some notes, believe it or not. Whew, boy, what is wrong with me today? Okay. I'm glad Brother Clyde didn't Brother Clyde make this? Well, yeah, where's Brother Clyde? What's the deal on him?
You have several that are in the James class if they had already started.
Yeah, but Brother Clyde was in here last quarter.
No, but they now have the James class back, and it's the second part, so a lot of the people were in here are now in the James.
Were they not doing the James class this first quarter?
No.
Oh.
It was last year, and so this is the second.
Yeah, Linda went there, and she said they started in chapter 2.
Well, I don't know.
Huh. Well, I'm in good company. You know? I mean, I'm in chapter 5 out of 21. Okay, all right, well, okay, I'll just take what I can get. Thank y'all for being here. Okay, I want to make it as interesting as possible. And, ma'am? Okay, all right. I do really like this class. I was hoping y'all would like it as well, but maybe not. All right. This is the Gospel of John, and those of you who are new, there is a notebook prepared by Miss Sonia, and I don't know where it is. Do we know where those are? Is that it right here? John, check it out for us. Anyway, if you want a notebook, there's one there. Maybe not. There's one commentary left in there. Okay, all right, let's make a brief comment on the nobleman's son. Don't want to go, I really want to get into chapter 5 if we can. By the way, I've already told you had a lot of stuff on my calendar before we ever, joined the work here, and so April's really crowded. And the next Sunday, this is the craziest thing to me. We're leaving after service today to go to Southeast to the lectureship. It's up there, and hoping some of you all will come one day or one night. Possibly be lectures every night. And our own Brother Allen will be speaking tomorrow, and I'll be speaking, I think, Tuesday night. But anyway, and then this congregation in Kentucky where I was several years ago, their meeting starts Thursday and goes through Sunday. Is that like weird? Have you ever heard of any congregation doing that anywhere? No. I never have. I mean, anyway. So anyway, I'm going to do that, and I got smooth sailing until June. So I'm looking forward to that. So we'll make up some time. But thank y'all for working with me. And Brother John, you're still planning on helping next Lord's Day. And we're continuing to pray for Miss Hannah and for Tracy. And I guess we should pray for John, too. Have you lost weight since she's been gone?
I don't think so.
Okay. I eat pretty slim when my wife is gone. Okay. All right. In John chapter 4, to save some time, I won't read it all, but at any rate, he comes in contact with some translations say the nobleman's son. Others say what? In John chapter 4, verse number what? 46. Some of you have something else? The royal official. Okay, that's the New American Standard, at least. Okay, so he comes, and what is he interested in? You've already read this, I'm assuming.
Is his son healed?
All right, he's wanting his son healed, but is his son with him? No. So where is he, John?
Back home.
All right, he's back home. And so this man wants Jesus to come, heal his son. Now notice verse 48. Unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe. Verse number 48. Now, you first read that and you think, well, that's kind of a curt response. to this man who is wanting the Lord to heal his son. But what you have to remember is, well, you really can't pick up on it in the English. You just have to dig a little bit. But you here is in the plural. And so, and then the people is in italics. And so that's been supplied. But he's speaking in the plural. And he's talking to whom? What kind of people? Judeans, Galileans? Galileans. Now you remember in John 2, there were many Galileans who were there were Galileans who were in Jerusalem at the Passover. And so they would have seen the signs that Jesus did. And don't forget, the Galileans are coming up in chapter 6. And what happens? Jesus is going to feed, them, 5,000 male people, probably 20,000 or more altogether. And then Jesus is trying to teach them, and they say, show us a sign that we may believe, which is incredible to me, because he just fed all these people with, 5 loaves and 2 fish, as we'll see. And so I think that background helps a little bit appreciate this statement. He's saying all you guys are interested in, are signs, but he's really not coming down just on the nobleman or the royal official.
Hey, David.
Yes, sir.
Has the nobleman asked a question yet?
Let's see.
The way I read it, he hasn't. I think Jesus makes a statement.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. I guess I was just assuming Jesus knew what was coming down. Pardon?
In verse before, it says he implored.
Yeah, 47, Doug says he went to him and implored him to come down, for he was at the point of death. Okay, so he had spoken to him. Apparently he repeats himself in verse 49 then, doesn't he? Come down before my child dies. Well, it's not the exact same words. The first part, he says, I want you to come down and heal my son. And now he's saying he's at the point of death. Jesus says, go your way, your son lives. And so, long story short, the boy is healed. Now, notice that the Bible says that this was what hour? I was so focused on 5, I've lost my place. 52 was the 7th hour. And what was the 7th hour? Who can tell me?
1 o'clock.
Okay, it's 1 o'clock according to Jewish time. Okay, the 7th hour according to Roman time would be what?
7 in the morning? Did that start at midnight?
Yeah, but I thought I read somewhere where it was 7 p.m. That's not right, though, because Roman time, we're on Roman time, ourselves. But the 7th hour for the Jews would be 1 o'clock. But here's the question. If, when he meets his people, his servants and so forth, they say, yesterday at the 7th hour his fever was healed. All right, now here's the question. If you had a son that was almost to pass away, and you ask Jesus, to heal him, and Jesus says he's healed, okay, and that's 1 o'clock, okay, wouldn't you be headed to the house?
How far did you travel?
How far is it?
17 miles.
All right, see, a trip is about 20 miles a day. I mean, that was about it. I mean, general estimates, they could make it about 20 miles, in a day. And it is 17, isn't it? But, good night. I mean, if I was on a donkey, I still think I'd be heading to the house. So the question I have is, why didn't he do that? A couple of things come to mind. Number one, he could have had such faith in Jesus that, he's saying, well, it's a done deal. You know what I mean? He's healed. I don't have anything to worry about. I got my business to take care of, so I'm going to attend to my business. Or, Beth?
The man believed.
Yeah.
He knew his son was going to be okay.
Right. And so I think it's an emphasis on his faith. But he could have had some practical problems too. Really, you think about it. His horse could have thrown a shoe. He had to go to the blacksmith shop. One of the spokes in his chariot wheel was broken or something. I mean, any number of things we could think about. But I just want us to think about his faith. So see, in verse 50 it says he believed the word that Jesus spoke. Now let's drop down to verse 53. And so the father knew it was at the same hour in which Jesus said to him, your son lives. And he himself believed. Now I thought he already believed. Did he not? We just read that.
He believed that his son would be well, would be healed.
Okay. He says, believe. Let me read you. This is at the commentary, top of 199. Some of y'all could just quote it, having read it and studied it, I think, couldn't you? Okay, it's a statement by Brother Woods. The nobleman first believed in the power of Jesus, then in the efficacy of his word, and finally on the Lord himself. Before he believed about Jesus, now he believed on Jesus. So whatever you want to take from that, it seems to me that there might be maybe even a progression of faith, on his part. You remember when we studied about the Samaritan woman? There was, progression, of her faith. She first thought the Lord was just a man and then a prophet and then the Messiah. And we're going to see the same thing with the blind man when we...
If I read it right, Jesus tells him thy son liveth, and as he goes, the servant comes along and confirms it. Is that the correct? He confirms that he liveth.
Well, he just asked him, what hour of the day it was. I mean, the servants meet him and says, your son's alive. And then he asked what was the hour, and he says 7th hour, All right, y'all have,
David?
yes, sir.
Over in the scriptures it says, I believe, help me in my unbelief.
Right.
Is that an example of progression?
Let me say it this way. I think if we're thinking reasonably, I think that all of us have progression in our faith. When we become Christians, we have enough faith to believe that Jesus is God's Son, died for us, our Savior, right? We believe what He said to do in order to be saved, correct? We do that. But there's a whole lot we don't have figured out, isn't it? And so then we grow and we develop and so forth, and sometimes we even disbelieve some things. I have baptized people who held to some rather strange things, but they were convinced that they would be lost if they did not repent of their sins, confess their faith, and be baptized. And I baptized them. And then I said, now, let's go to work on some of the things, that you have doubts about. Y'all may disagree with that, but I don't.
You can't know everything when you're baptized. We never know it all.
Right. Here's a case in point. A friend of mine and I, down in Mississippi, we working with a little mission church, Lexington, Mississippi. And before I got there, this friend of mine baptized this man and woman, and the man was the son of 2 other people in the Methodist church, okay? Now let me just show you, it was in Chula, Mississippi, a little bitty church in the Delta. Now, the older man, the father, he was a deacon, all right? His wife was like the treasurer. Her son was the head of the finance committee, and his wife was a choir director. I mean, we cleaned out the church, there. I mean, their leaders are gone now, as a result of what we did. And so at any rate, long story short, my friend John baptized the son and the daughter. Okay, the daughter, as I just said, was a choir director. She had a master's in music from, I think it was what's called Delta State in Mississippi. And she was not convinced that instrumental music was wrong, in worship. And John and I talked about it, And I said, well, is she convinced she's lost without, doing what the Lord's told her to do? He said, yes. I said, I'd baptize her. I said, that's my feeling about it. And so he did. And then, we worked together, and her husband died many, many years later. And then I talked to her just recently because she moved, and she's still just faithful to the Lord, as she was from day one. But her faith, Brother Elon, has increased, I think. And there were some things that she did not believe, so I would call that unbelief. But now, she's very much, a believer. So that's where I am on that. I think that we need to give people the opportunity to grow and develop. What do y'all think about it? What about it? What about it, Brother Jonathan?
Yes, absolutely.
You agree with that?
I taught that last week. There's degrees of faith, great faith, strong faith, little faith.
Yeah,
little faith.
exactly. Sometimes I've had students come up to me and they're real concerned about a particular question, and honestly, I don't really want to deal with it, because it's like, well, good night. I worked that out about 50 years ago, in my own head. But I have to remember they don't have it worked out, in their head, to suit themselves. And so I think we just have to do that. And if we're not careful, we could kind of look down our nose at somebody else and say, you poor, ignorant person or whatever. And God help us to never do that. Let's all try to understand that, all of us, we're all, what's the word? We're all in the works, as it were. God's shaping us and so forth. John?
It's a good point in the commentary, I thought, where
What commentary was that? Oh, sorry. I'm just
where you're talking about how we can be critical of this man that he said, well, Jesus, you got to come to the house. You can't do it remotely.
Right.
But it's really, and if you got to hurry, because if he dies, then you're done. You can't help him then.
Yeah.
Not thinking he could raise the dead. Well, Mary and Martha had the same limitations in mind. He couldn't have done it from a distance. He had to be there.
Yeah.
And that once he's dead, it's too late.
Right.
So they had the same.
Yeah, they said, had you been here, our brother would not have died. But, well, see, there's an example of faith increasing. And this man's a good example of that. Okay, now which sign is this? The second sign. There's a hint on that on the last verse, right? Okay. Now, don't forget, Jesus, at the end of chapter 2, Jesus has done many signs already in Jerusalem, at the Passover, okay? But this is the second of the 7 signs that John records for us, okay? He records 7 signs. This is number 2, okay? All right, let's look at chapter 5. Now, chapter 5 has to do with the healing of the lame man. I call the chapter The Great Physician. And there's really 2 parts to the chapter. One has to do with the healing of the lame man, and then the second part has to do with how Jesus responds, to the Jews. Now, you remember in our first class, I said that the word Jews sometimes is used in a neutral sense, like in John 4, where the Lord said salvation begins with the Jews. Y'all remember that statement? And I think, that the idea there is, the whole background, of Judaism and the Old Testament and so forth and so on, leading up to Christ and Christ being a Jew, etc. So there, it's used kind of a neutral sense. But most of the time, maybe I should say frequently, if not most of the time, it's used in a hostile sense, very hostile. In chapter 5, the hostility begins. I make this statement on page 207. For this reason, unbelief becomes a dominant theme in John's record of the public ministry, of Jesus. His public ministry ends in chapter 12, and now each chapter leading up to that specifically mentions unbelief or hostility among Jesus' hearers. And I give a number of verses, to that effect on this first page, of the chapter. So just kind of, keep that in mind. All right, now, so there's a feast in Jerusalem. It says there's a feast of the Jews in Jerusalem. All right, now, what is this feast? Some people think that this is a Passover feast. It does not say the feast. It lacks a definite article. It says a feast. I'm not implying that if it said the, that it would be the Passover, but you could really write a commentary on John just surrounding the feast, as it were. But some brethren believe that this is a Passover. I don't think it's a Passover myself. And there's some reasons I give in the commentary, for that. But you've got the Passover, you remember, in chapter 2. Then you got, Passover coming down when, John? Chapter 6 or close there? When the, am I right about that? As Rachel can testify back there, I'm already really not with it. Yeah, chapter 6, verse 4, Passover, the feast of the Jews, was near. So it doesn't seem likely that this would be a Passover. If so, you got a year, between chapter 5 and chapter 6. You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense to you? So it's just a feast. Now, I think that John points out that this is a feast, to call attention, probably, and then it's also a Sabbath, to call attention to this lame man who's going to be healed. Okay? Now, that raises another question then. What is the feast? Well, there's been a lot of speculation. I happen to think it's the Feast of Purim, Purim. Do you know what the Feast of Purim was? Who can tell me? Where is the Feast of Purim recorded in the Old Testament? Trick question. Why? It's not recorded.
It's when they purified the tabernacle after the Antioch Epiphanes.
Well, no. Purim celebrates what happened that's recorded in the book of Esther. What happened in Esther? You remember the Persians cast lots to see what day to massacre, the Jews. Guess what the word Purim means? It means lots, okay? And during this feast, the book of Esther, was always read. And by the way, Linda and I had the opportunity to see last year at Branson. I was in Conway, Missouri doing a meeting, and the people that we were staying with took us, we stayed a day or two extra and took us to the Esther play. Have y'all heard about that? It started in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and still going on. It was just amazing, the set. Have some of you been, what do they call those plays? I forgot. There's a special name, for what they do there. You don't know? Linda knows. But at any rate, it took 53 transport trucks to move the set from Pennsylvania to Branson. I mean, it was just amazing. I mean, we were sitting there, and there's horses walking down the aisle. I'm thinking, there's a horse, And but at any rate, it was really, if you get it, it's still on, as a matter of fact. If you plan to do any traveling this summer, try to take that in. But anyway, too much on that. I think it's Purim. Now, in Jerusalem by the sheep gate, there's a pool, and it's called in Hebrew Bethesda, and it has 5 porches. Okay, now let's see. I'm not even doing my work here. Let's see. Wait a minute. Am I going backwards? I'm going backwards. Wrong button here. Y'all bear with me. Okay, here's where we were. All right. Now, why do I mention this? Why do I show this map? Because in 46 of chapter 4, Jesus is at Cana. And so now he's going to go where? To Jerusalem. And so you can see Cana, right up here. This Galilee. And then Jerusalem's always down here. Jerusalem just west of the north part of the Dead Sea. Okay? All right? Just wanted to show you where he is. This is, it's a map, it has the pool on it, but here's a picture of the pool. And here is an artist. This is what's been put together. Have some of you been to Jerusalem? I know some have. Who was it in here? Who was it that used to say they were there? Am I dreaming?
They went to the other class.
Well, who was it?
I don't know.
You're not being nice. Okay. I called you Rachel today and not Nurse Cratchit. Okay. All right. But this is if you go to Jerusalem, you can see this, set up. But I wanted you to see the columns and the porches and so forth. Can you kind of make that out there? All right, here's some steps, to the pool. Here's another picture, of it. And here's this guy. This is found in a cave somewhere. No, I'm just kidding. Boy, guy's got a hairy leg, hasn't he? But at any rate.
Hey, David, what would those pools have been used for most of the time?
Some of it, well, in this case, the people believed that it had healing power. And so, that in particular, there might have been some other uses, like some of the Jewish rites of purification and some things like that. But, I don't really know the details, about that. Okay, now let's look at this a little bit. And in these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water, for an angel went down on a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first, after the stirring of the water, was made well of whatever disease he had. All right, now, got to, inform us about this. If you have a decent study Bible, you probably have asterisks, brackets, comments in the footnotes. Am I right? Y'all? Yes? Pardon?
Yes, we have.
Okay. What, you got the American Standard, Jonathan?
I got King James.
Oh, King James? Well, you still got something in footnote, don't you?
Yes.
Okay. All of you pay attention to that. These are not translators trying to mess with you. The bottom line is the end of verse 3, waiting for the moving of the water, and all of verse 4 is not found in the earliest manuscripts, of the New Testament. Now that disturbs a whole lot of people. It does not disturb me. Either way you want to believe that, I love you, and I say go for it, okay? But if you got my commentary, you can read, in the footnote where I talk about that. What page is it, John? Page 210, page 210. But at any rate, it's believed to be a scribal gloss. And so the idea, believe it or not, the scribes tried to help things along. Do you believe that? They did. Now think about this fact. We do not have any original copies, of the Bible. We do not have what Paul wrote. We do not have what Peter wrote. We do not have what John wrote. But what we have are thousands of copies of manuscripts and all kinds of evidence. Okay, then what's called textual criticism, scholars like men like Bruce Metzger and others, they take all of this and then they try to arrive, at the original text. Does that make sense? Did I use in my interpreting class an illustration about a letter from the president? Some of you remember that? You don't? Okay. Well, real quick, it's as if I received a letter, from a high-ranking person I have great respect for, okay? And then I go to my class and I read it to my class. say I'm at Freed Hardeman, I read it to my students, and I say, now I want y'all to take copious notes. I'm going to read it very slowly so you can write down every sentence. Okay, and then I come in a few days later, and I'm very sad, Jill, and I say to my students, guys, I've lost my letter. I said, but I want y'all to help me, recover it. And so then I say, I remember it said, Dear David, and then I can't remember the rest of it, exactly. And so then I'll say, now Chase, could you read for me what the first sentence was? And you read it. And I say, Jerry, could you read me what your sentence is? And you read it. And I do that with maybe 10 or 15 people. And I finally, find the only difference, is maybe a word here or there, a the, an and or something like that. And then I say, well, it looks like what he said was this. You see what I mean? And then I do that with every sentence. Now, in my judgment, when I do that, I have the message from the governor or whomever. Do you see what I mean? So that's kind of what happened with the Bible, if you think about it. Nobody questions, say, the works of Homer, in Greek. But, it's just a handful, of manuscripts that have anything about Homer's writings. But in the New Testament, we literally have thousands. The only thing that's in question is something just like about that much. And it has only to do, with an article or the lack thereof or whatever. And there's nothing to do with our salvation. Just like this verse right here. This is not going to hurt our salvation one way or the other, is it? But the thought is, this is a scribe's attempt to explain the troubling of the water. Okay? That's their attempt. Now, how was the water troubled? Probably. It did it periodically. Any of you ever been to Old Faithful? You have? Okay. That happens periodically, doesn't it? Well, guess what? In this pool, periodically the water was, bubbled up and stuff. How? Maybe some pressure from some spring, or something, where, water is, or air, is coming up in the pool, and they can't really figure that out. And so they got to come up with some kind of interpretation. Well, what is it? Well, an angel came down and stirred up the water. Okay, now you really remind me of Acts 1. Where the two men in white apparel said to the apostles, Tracy, why gaze ye into the heavens? Are we totally confused about this?
I always wondered why that was such a cruel angel to just stir up the water and see who can jump in first. That really clears up the water.
I think it's an attempt. You see, here's what we don't understand sometimes. Take the word, I want to use my board, yay. Okay. All right, I'm going to put it in English letters. I have to think because I can write the Greek easier. All right, this word luo means to loose or destroy. Okay, there's another word. Now let me think. No, that's not right. I know the Greek letters. Okay. Oh yeah, it's going to be this. Okay. All right. Luo. This word right here means to wash. All right. But they're pronounced the same. Both of them. But they're two different words. Okay, now imagine a scribe. You've got a man up here reading a manuscript, okay? And you've got 20 scribes out here. What are they doing? They're writing, okay? And one of them's kind of weary. He's been writing 6-7 hours, and it's like he's daydreaming. He's thinking about home. He's thinking he needs to get his turnips in the ground, or something's flooding his mind. And he hears luo, and he just writes, maybe the text said luo to loose, but he just writes luo to wash because he's not paying attention to the context. And there's an example of that, and you've kind of thrown me off because I don't remember exactly where it is. But Let's see if I can find it. I thought it was 3:14. No, is it 7:14? Yeah, 7:14. These are the ones who come out of great tribulation and washed their robes. That may not be it, but there's one where it says we have been, it's wash. That might be it, instead of loose, but it's our sins. I'll have to look it up to tell you, but it's a clear example where in the King James it's translated, I think it's translated wash or loose, one or the other, but then the Greek word is just the opposite. Do you see what I'm saying? So we have to understand, how this book came to be, in our hands. It didn't drop out of the clouds, Genesis all the way through Revelation. That's a whole interesting study in itself. How did it come to be, to begin with? Y'all have observation on that or any question you'd like to ask, Brother Doug?
The only thing that I'm curious about is why did so many of these people believe that people would get healed if they went into that water park? I mean, somebody either received them.
Good question. Good question. Good question, Doug.
Would only take one time somebody going in the pool and they're not healed, because they weren't.
Or somebody going in and then they're feeling better, and they say, well, I feel a whole lot better. And we all have had experiences with that, haven't we? We know cases where people have been given sugar pills, instead of some kind of really effective prescription. Jill?
People go to the health springs out west to get
Yeah,
water.
yeah. And maybe it had some kind of, boy, I'm really not getting my words good today. Pardon?
Therapeutic?
Yeah. Or curative, either one. And maybe it does have some. I know there have been some times that I got in a tub and I got in it with the water hot as I could stand it. And while in the tub, I turned on the hot water and got it to where when I came out, you could see the print, on my body.
Wouldn't some of it be cultural too? Because Jewish people, they get everything wet to themselves wet for everything.
Maybe. But at any rate, here, let's get back to our story real quick. Now, this man, here's what's really, this is really important, guys. Verse 5 says, he had an infirmity for 38 years. Is that it? My watch says we have 5 more minutes. What time is it supposed to ring?
15 till.
So my watch is off 5 minutes?
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Well, did they ring it early? Okay, so we don't have to go yet.
Give us 2.
Can we do 2 minutes? Okay, now, hey, listen, here's real important. John's going to finish it next week. He is 38 years of age, all right? And Jesus goes to him and says, rise, take up your bed and walk. John, be sure to tell him, about, what's said in the Shabbat, track in the Mishnah, where there's 39 acts of work that are forbidden on the Sabbath. Guess what? The last one is taking an object from one place to another, which would be his pallet, see? All right, and so there's 2 things going on here that are very important. Number 1, Jesus healed on the Sabbath. Number 2, he told him to get up and walk. Okay, those two things. I think I said that right. Let me check my notes here. His carrying of his bed and then the healing. Now here's another thing. Now watch this. The man has been lame 38 years. Today is the Sabbath. Could he not have waited one more day? I mean, couldn't Jesus have said, well, he's been lame 38 years. I'll just do it tomorrow.
It wasn't the angel stirring it up, it was Jesus stirring it up.
Why did Jesus not wait a day? No, because at this point in his ministry, he is wanting to engage the Jews. in discussion. This is the beginning of where things start coming down. It's an exciting part, of John, because Jesus does this deliberately. You see, it's not just some accidental thing that he's doing. He deliberately heals on this day, and Jesus, over and over, he used the Sabbath day as his test case to show how he acted on the Sabbath versus the way the Jews, said you could not act on the Sabbath. And so over and over we find things like, Jesus, you take an ox out of the ditch, but you're on me because I heal a man. You see, he's constantly showing their inconsistency. Yeah, I mean, that might be involved. It's definitely going away, isn't it? Okay, thanks for that. I hope that helps a little bit just to break the ice.